We all recognize the appeal of status. Luxury cars, big houses, flashy possessions. We assume that these things will earn admiration and respect. Yet paradoxically, the people around us rarely notice or care as much as we think. In this chapter, we'll explore the man in the car paradox, uncovering why chasing status often fails to bring fulfillment and how understanding this truth can free us to focus on what truly matters in life. The power of asymmetric bets. When most people think about risk, they imagine a scale. One side represents what you could lose, the other what you could gain. The common belief is that these sides must balance out. You take big risks, you might make big gains. You play it safe, you earn smaller rewards. But the truth, as revealed by some of the greatest investors, thinkers, and entrepreneurs, is far more interesting. In life and in money, not all risks are created equal. Some opportunities are structured in such a way that your downside is limited, sometimes even minimal, while the upside is unlimited. These are what we call asymmetric bets. Think about it like flipping a coin. If you bet $1 and heads means you lose that dollar while tails means you win $10, would you ever hesitate to flip? Even if you lost a few times in a row, eventually the tails would more than cover your losses and leave you ahead. That's the beauty of asymmetry. You can be wrong most of the time and still come out as a winner, because when you're right, the payoff is so outsized that it transforms the entire game. Now let's bring this out of theory and into the real world. Venture capitalists, for example, build their entire strategy on asymmetric bets. They know that most startups they fund will fail. Some will barely get off the ground. Others might survive for a few years and fade away. But a tiny fraction, maybe 1 out of 20 or even 1 out of 50, explodes in value and returns more than enough to cover every loss, plus extraordinary profits on top. This is why investors who backed early versions of companies like Amazon, Google, or Airbnb didn't need to be right often. They just needed one tail to land in their favor, and it changed everything. The same principle applies outside of business. Imagine a young professional who dedicates time to learning a new skill that only costs them a few hours a week. Perhaps they explore public speaking, coding, or investing. For most people, that small investment of time might not yield a noticeable return, but for a few, it becomes a career-defining edge, opening doors to promotions, business opportunities, or even entirely new industries. The downside was minimal, just a few evenings of effort. The upside, however, was enormous, a life and income trajectory that shifted forever. What makes asymmetric bets so powerful is that they defy the traditional idea of risk as something to be avoided. Instead, they invite us to rethink risk as something to be managed intelligently. By seeking opportunities where the cost of being wrong is low and the benefit of being right is massive, you flip the equation of risk in your favor. Consider the personal story of investor and author Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who popularized the concept of tails you win. He explains that much of modern wealth, innovation, and progress doesn't come from the predictable middle ground. It comes from rare, unpredictable events on the edges, the so-called long tails. These are the big breakthroughs, the surprise inventions, the once-in-a-decade market moves. They're hard to predict, but they don't need to happen often. You only need a few to tilt your entire financial future. And this is where most people get it wrong. They spend their time chasing tiny wins, trying to outguess the stock market day by day, or saving pennies by cutting small luxuries. Meanwhile, they overlook the fact that one asymmetric bet, one chance that carries a limited cost but potentially life-changing reward, can outweigh years of cautious, incremental progress. The lesson here isn't to gamble recklessly or chase every shiny opportunity. In fact, asymmetric bets work best when paired with patience and discipline. The goal is to position yourself so that when opportunity strikes, you're ready to take advantage. It's about recognizing that in money, as in life, sometimes the best way to win big is not to be right all the time, but to be right once in a very big way. So as we step deeper into this chapter, keep this idea at the forefront. You don't need to win every flip of the coin. You just need to structure your life so that when tails shows up, you win, and win big. Rare events, outsized rewards. Most of the time, life feels predictable. You wake up, you go to work, you pay your bills, and you expect tomorrow to look pretty similar to today. But history and wealth aren't written in the predictable middle. They're shaped by rare, extreme events, the ones we least expect and can't easily model. These moments are called tail events, and they're the hidden drivers of most financial fortunes. In statistics, a tail refers to the outer edges of a distribution curve, the unlikely outcomes that almost never occur. But when they do occur, they have an outsized impact. Consider the 2008 financial crisis. Few people saw it coming. For most, it was devastating. Yet for a small group of investors who placed asymmetric bets against the housing market, it was life-changing. Their losses were limited to the small premiums they paid on insurance-like contracts, but their gains were in the billions when the rare event finally arrived. This dynamic plays out far beyond Wall Street. Take the story of J.K. Rowling. For years, she was a single mother struggling to make ends meet, writing in cafes during her daughter's naps. She sent her manuscript for Harry Potter to publisher after publisher, and almost all of them rejected her. On the surface, she was spending her time on something with a very high chance of failure. But the cost of failure, rejection letters, some lost hours, maybe a bruised ego, was minimal compared to the potential upside. When one publisher finally said yes, the result was not just a successful book, but a global franchise worth billions. That's a tail event. Unlikely, but massively consequential. The same pattern is visible in technology. Think about Apple. When Steve Jobs returned to the company in the late 1990s, Apple was on the brink of collapse. The company placed a huge bet on the iPod, then the iPhone. These products weren't guaranteed to succeed. Many thought they would flop. The downside was significant. Millions spent in development, possible embarrassment, maybe even bankruptcy. But the upside was revolutionary. The iPhone didn't just save Apple, it turned it into one of the most valuable companies in history. Why are these examples so important for you and me? Because they remind us that most of the rewards in life don't come from the steady, predictable middle. They come from the rare, powerful tails. And here's the most empowering part. You don't need many of them. One or two of these rare opportunities, properly captured, can define your financial story forever. Now, this doesn't mean you should spend your life chasing lottery tickets or waiting for miracles. The lesson is subtler. Position yourself so that when tail events do occur, you're in a place to benefit from them rather than be crushed by them. That could mean saving consistently so you can invest when others panic. It could mean cultivating skills and relationships so you're ready when a rare career opportunity comes your way. It could mean experimenting with small side projects, knowing most won't pan out, but one might turn into something extraordinary. This is the opposite of how most people think about success. We imagine it as a straight line of progress. Study hard, work hard, climb the ladder, retire comfortably. But in reality, most great leaps happen suddenly, often unexpectedly, and disproportionately because of tail events. It's less about always making the right move, and more about being ready when the rare, high-reward move finally comes along. The investor Peter Lynch once said, "In investing, you only need to be right a few times in your lifetime, as long as you don't go broke in between." That's the essence of asymmetric thinking. You don't need to nail every decision. You just need to avoid ruin and stay in the game long enough for the rare events to find you. So as we continue this journey through Tails You Win, remember this. It's not about predicting the unpredictable. It's about respecting the power of rare events and shaping your life so that when they do appear, you're standing on the right side of them. Because in money and in life, it's often the tails, the rare, the unlikely, the unexpected, that make all the difference. Why most people miss the tails? If asymmetric bets are so powerful, why don't more people use them? Why do so many of us cling to safe, predictable paths, even when those paths rarely lead to extraordinary outcomes? The answer lies in human psychology. Our brains aren't built to easily understand or embrace the logic of tails. We evolved to survive in a world where small, immediate risks, like a rustle in the bushes or spoiled food, mattered more than long-term opportunities. This wiring makes us overly sensitive to short-term losses and blind to rare, high-reward possibilities. In behavioral finance, this is called loss aversion. Put simply, the pain of losing a dollar feels much stronger than the joy of gaining a dollar. When faced with an opportunity where the downside is small, but the upside is huge, many people focus only on the chance of losing, even if it's trivial. Take the stock market. Most investors panic at small downturns, selling when prices fall, even though history shows that downturns are often temporary and sometimes even the setup for massive gains. Their fear of short-term pain keeps them from holding on long enough to benefit from the rare asymmetric returns that markets deliver over time. In other words, they avoid tails because they can't stomach being wrong in the short run. Another psychological trap is our obsession with being right. We're conditioned in school and work to value accuracy, to avoid mistakes, to get the right answer every time. But asymmetric bets don't require you to be right often. They require you to accept that you'll be wrong most of the time, but that when you are right, it counts in a big way. That's a hard mindset to embrace. Imagine telling yourself, I'm okay with failing 9 out of 10 times, as long as the 10th time makes up for it. Most people would rather avoid the embarrassment of repeated small failures, even if it means missing out on a massive win. Consider Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. In the early years, he faced countless product failures. Many of Amazon's ideas, from the Fire Phone to countless side projects, lost money. But Bezos understood that the occasional big win, like Amazon Web Services, would more than compensate for the small losses. His philosophy was simple. Outsized returns often come from betting against conventional wisdom and accepting that you'll be wrong most of the time. That willingness to embrace being wrong is why Amazon became one of the world's most valuable companies. But here's the problem. Most of us aren't wired like Bezos. We crave certainty, comfort, and the reassurance of small, predictable wins. That's why people line up for guaranteed paychecks, fixed interest savings accounts, or strategies that feel safe but rarely move the needle. We underestimate how many times we can be wrong and still succeed if the upside is strong enough. We'd rather be consistently okay than occasionally extraordinary. And this isn't just about money. It applies to careers, relationships, and personal growth. Many people avoid applying for a dream job because they fear rejection. They avoid starting a business because they're afraid of failing. They avoid speaking up with an idea because they don't want to look foolish. In each case, the downside is small, some embarrassment, a little wasted time, maybe a temporary setback. But the upside, landing a breakthrough opportunity, building a business, or sparking a life-changing connection, could be enormous. Yet our psychology tricks us into focusing on the risk of loss instead of the scale of the potential win. To win in a world driven by tails, we need to reframe how we think about failure. Each small failure is not a defeat. It's the entry cost for a shot at a rare, transformative success. The key is making sure those failures don't wipe us out. That's why asymmetric bets are so powerful. You can afford many small failures because the losses are capped, but the wins are life-changing. So why do most people miss the tails? Because they can't stand being wrong, even when being wrong cheaply is the price of being right in a big way. Because they prefer the comfort of the predictable over the uncertainty of the extraordinary. And because they underestimate how rare events, not daily routines, shape the arc of wealth and life. As you listen to this, think about your own patterns. How many opportunities have you passed on because you feared a small failure? How many tails might you have missed because you were focused on avoiding embarrassment, inconvenience, or short-term loss? Remember, the game isn't about being right all the time. It's about being positioned so that when the rare, extraordinary outcome appears, you're ready to seize it. Positioning yourself for the tails. We've seen that tails, rare, asymmetric events, hold the power to shape fortunes, careers, and even entire lives. But here's the big question. How do you actually position yourself to benefit from them? After all, by definition, these events are unpredictable. You can't know exactly when or where they'll show up. But you can build a life strategy that makes you resilient against the downside and open to the upside when those tails inevitably arrive. The first step is simple: stay in the game. The biggest mistake people make is taking risks that can wipe them out entirely. If you bet everything on one stock, one business idea, or one big swing, you might win. But you might also lose so badly that you're forced out of the game forever. Asymmetric thinking only works if you protect your ability to keep flipping the coin. That's why financial independence begins with a solid foundation: an emergency fund, manageable expenses, and protection against catastrophic losses. You need a stable base that allows you to take shots without fear of total ruin. Next, embrace small, repeated experiments. Think of them as affordable options on the future. Start side projects, explore new skills, test small investments. Most of them won't work out, and that's fine because the cost of failure is small. But every now and then, one of those experiments might turn into something extraordinary. Think of the early coder who built a small app for fun, only to see it explode into a career-launching product. Or the investor who puts tiny amounts into multiple startups, knowing most will fail, but one could return 100 times their money. Each small bet is like buying a ticket for a chance at a tail. Third, cultivate optionality. Optionality means structuring your life so that you have choices when rare opportunities appear. For example, keeping your finances flexible instead of drowning in debt. Building a wide network of connections so that unexpected doors open. Developing skills that make you adaptable so you can pivot quickly when something promising emerges. The more optionality you have, the easier it becomes to seize the upside when it shows up. Another key is patience. Tails don't arrive on a predictable schedule. They might take years or even decades. The people who benefit from them are usually the ones who are willing to play the long game. Warren Buffett once said, "You only have to do a very few things right in your life so long as you don't do too many things wrong." That's the heart of positioning yourself for tails. It's not about constant action. It's about waiting, watching, and being ready when opportunity finally comes. And let's not forget mindset. You have to learn to be comfortable with looking wrong most of the time. Friends might question why you're trying different projects that don't always succeed. Colleagues might wonder why you're not sticking to the safe path. But remember, 9 out of 10 failures don't matter if the 10th attempt is a breakthrough. In fact, being willing to look foolish is often the secret cost of capturing tails. Consider how this plays out in real lives. A musician might play in obscurity for years, releasing song after song with little recognition. Then one track goes viral, and their career changes overnight. An entrepreneur might launch 3 failed businesses, each one teaching lessons and building resilience. Then the 4th takes off and defines their legacy. A scientist might publish dozens of papers with modest impact until one discovery reshapes an entire field. These are tales at work, rare, unpredictable, but utterly transformative. So how do you prepare? By structuring your life so the downside of trying is small and the upside of succeeding is massive. By diversifying your bets so that failure in one area doesn't knock you out. By cultivating patience and resilience so you can endure the many small losses along the way. And most importantly, by never forgetting that you don't need to be right often. You just need to be right once in a big way. In the end, Tails You Win is less about predicting the future and more about preparing for it. You can't know when the rare events will come, but you can build a life that's ready to capture them when they do. Protect your downside, experiment often, create options, and stay patient. Do this and you won't just survive uncertainty, you'll thrive in it. Because when the tails finally appear, you'll be positioned not just to play the game, but to win it. So far, we've explored how a few rare, asymmetric wins can change everything, and how staying in the game is more important than being right all the time. But there's another hidden truth about wealth. It isn't always visible. In fact, the most powerful form of wealth isn't the car in the driveway or the house on the hill. It's what you don't see. In the next chapter, Wealth is What You Don't See, we'll uncover why real wealth is often invisible and how understanding this can reshape your relationship with money forever.